Welcome back, fellow seekers of the shadows. You've tuned into Stories of Crime, the place where the veil between the mundane and the monstrous is brutally ripped away. Tonight, we aren't just reading a report. We are opening a file, marked top priority, tucked away in the darkest corner of the archives. We're going to step across that chalk line and peer into the void, where human nature meets its most terrifying extremes. In this hour, the street lights flicker, the shadows deepen, and the truth is often far more chilling than any fiction you could invent. Forget the heroes. Tonight, we focus on the villains. On the motives that curdle the blood, and the consequences that echo forever. So, dim the lights. Lock your doors. Take a deep, steadying breath, because once the story begins, there's no turning back. This is Stories of Crime. And the case we're unfolding tonight is The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Look. The mystery that killed its creator. Good evening, or perhaps, given the unsettling atmosphere we're deliberately cultivating tonight, a more fitting greeting might be, welcome to the precipice of a literary abyss. Listen closely to that tempest, feel the chill it evokes, the dampness it seems to press against your very skin, even now. Imagine yourself transported to a grand, slightly drafty Victorian manor, a place of shadows and secrets, where the only constants are the relentless downpour outside and the inexorable march of time, marked by that persistent, almost hypnotic, ticking. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. The relentless pulse of a story unfolding, or perhaps, a life draining away. The storm sounds intensify briefly, a particularly sharp crack of thunder, then recede slightly, leaving the ticking clock more prominent. This isn't just a scene setter, you see. This isn't merely atmospheric window dressing. This deeply unsettling, almost mournful soundscape, the storm raging outside, mirroring an internal turmoil, and that steady, insistent clock, forms the very bedrock of the greatest literary enigma ever bequeathed to us. Because tonight, we delve into the dark heart of a tale so profoundly unfinished, so agonizingly abrupt, that its very creator was snatched away mid-sentence, leaving the world to grapple with the mystery he alone held the key to. The ticking clock begins to falter, skipping beats, becoming erratic, slower, heavier. The storm sounds seem to wail in sympathy, rising and falling like a dying breath. And then, silence. The clock grinds to a sudden, absolute halt. The last, mournful chime echoes briefly, then vanishes into a profound, suffocating quiet. The storm, too, seems to hold its breath for a moment, before resuming its slow, distant moan. That abrupt cessation, that sudden, crushing silence, it mirrors, with chilling precision, the very moment that Charles Dickens, the titan of English literature, the master storyteller whose imagination had brought to life an entire gallery of unforgettable characters, laid down his pen for the last, agonizing time. It was June the 9th, in the year of our Lord 1870. At Gad's Hill Place, his beloved home, surrounded by the familiar comfort of his study, with the final manuscript of his last novel lying open before him, Dickens suffered a stroke. He was writing. He was creating. He was, in all likelihood, about to reveal a crucial plot point, perhaps even the murderer himself, in the very book we are here to explore. But that revelation, that moment of truth, was never to be. His pen, poised to deliver the crucial sentence, faltered. His hand dropped. His magnificent mind, brimming with plots and characters, went dark. Think of the tragedy inherent in that moment. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated shock. One of the greatest literary minds in history, cut down not after completing his magnum opus, not after tying up every loose end and presenting his finished vision to the world, but in the throes of creation. He was caught mid-flight, mid-narrative, mid-revelation. His final words, if they could be deciphered from the last, broken sentence, were literally left hanging in the air, unfinished, unspoken. It's a death that leaves a profound chill, a sense of cosmic injustice. Not only did the world lose one of its most brilliant lights, but we were also robbed of the ending to what many believe would have been his darkest, most intricate, and perhaps, most masterful mystery. And so, we are left with the mystery of Edwin Drood. Not just a book, but a gaping void. A literary cliffhanger of epic proportions. A testament to human mortality and the fragile nature of even the most powerful genius. It is a novel that begins with a drug-induced opium haze, an almost hallucinatory journey into the underworld of London, and promises to delve into the very depths of human depravity and hidden desires. But it breaks off just as the shadows are lengthening, just as the pieces are beginning to fall into place, just as the suspense is reaching its fever pitch. It stops just shy of the precipice. Introduction, the narrator's lantern. Welcome, dear listener, to a journey not merely through pages, but through the very fabric of an unsolved enigma, a literary phantom that has haunted the hallowed halls of English literature for over a century and a half. Draw closer, if you will, and let the flickering, uncertain glow of my lantern cut through the perpetual gloom that hangs so heavily over us tonight, a gloom far thicker and more substantial than any mere shadow cast by the setting sun. You find yourself, even now, perched precariously on the very periphery of Cloisterham, a town not merely ancient and venerable, but one steeped, indeed saturated, in a kind of stifling, almost suffocating melancholic mystery. Feel the insidious chill in the air, not just the autumnal bite that nips at exposed skin, but a deeper, more pervasive cold that seems to seep into the very marrow of one's bones, a chill born of long-held secrets, of deeply buried unspoken truths, of something profoundly and irrevocably lost, forever yearning to be found. I am your guide tonight, your humble servant, yes, but also much more. I am a relentless seeker, a tireless pursuer of elusive shadows, a literary detective, if you will, tasked with an extraordinary, some might even call it an impossible, mission. My role is to lead you not just through the intricate pathways of the narrative itself, but through the labyrinthine corridors of human motive, the twisting, fog-laden alleys of psychological depth, and the dark, hidden, often dust-choked chambers where the ultimate truth of the mystery of Edwin Drood lies interred, silently awaiting its resurrection. This, you must understand, is not a simple recounting of events. It is an excavation, a meticulous, painstaking unearthing of fragile clues and robust character, of oppressive atmosphere and simmering intent, all meticulously woven into the grand, yet tragically unfinished, tapestry of Charles Dickens's final, magnificent masterpiece. Let your imagination take flight, dear listener, and conjure for a moment the very essence of our setting, Cloisterham. The very name itself, you'll note, evokes a profound sense of enclosure, of things deliberately cloistered away, hidden from the harsh, revealing light of day, much like the secrets we seek to uncover. And indeed, it is a town perpetually shrouded, not merely by the colossal, architectural weight of its ancient, brooding cathedral, whose stones have witnessed centuries of human folly and faith, but by an almost palpable mist, a low-hanging, damp, bone-chilling fog that seems to emanate from the very earth itself, rising like a spectral exhalation. It clings with tenacious, almost living tendrils to the ancient cobblestones, wreathes the crumbling, Gothic eaves of forgotten buildings, and mercilessly obscures the faces of passers-by, lending every hurried interaction a quality of the ephemeral, the half-seen, the easily misinterpreted, the fundamentally unreliable. This omnipresent fog, my friends, is far more than mere meteorological phenomenon. It is a sentient character in itself, a silent, pervasive presence, an atmospheric mirror reflecting the clouded perceptions, the tragically obscured realities, the fundamental lack of clarity that permeates every single thread of this perplexing narrative. It is a symbol of the mental and emotional fog in which the characters, and by extension, we ourselves, are forced to operate. And within this pervasive, physical fog, there exists another, perhaps even more insidious and disorienting haze. A haze not of damp earth and chilled air, but one born of opium, of dreams both unnervingly vivid and terrifyingly nightmarish, of altered states of consciousness that cruelly blur the once distinct lines between objective reality and subjective delusion, between what unequivocally is and what merely seems to be, a trick of the mind's own making. This, you see, is a story deeply, irrevocably entangled with the narcotic stupor, with its profound power to both shockingly reveal and cunningly conceal, to illuminate strange, unsettling new facets of the human PS. Chapter 1: The Opium Den and the Double Life. Welcome, intrepid literary explorers, to a journey into one of Charles Dickens' most enigmatic and unfinished masterpieces, The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Our expedition begins, as all good mysteries should, right at the very threshold, in Chapter 1. This isn't just an introduction to characters and setting, it's a plunge into a swirling vortex of shadows, addiction, and the terrifying prospect of a man living a double life. This opening chapter, famously titled The Dawn, immediately disorients us, pushing us into a world that feels both distinctly Victorian and unnervingly modern in its psychological depth. It's a masterful piece of scene setting, establishing a mood of unease and hidden depths that will permeate the entire narrative. Let's immerse ourselves, for a moment, in the very first scene Dickens presents. Imagine, if you will, the clammy, oppressive air of an opium den in London's East End. The scene is not merely described, it is felt. Dickens doesn't just show us, he envelops us. A thick, gray haze of smoke hangs heavy, swirling sluggishly like a malevolent fog, obscuring vision, and dulling the senses. It's a world where forms are indistinct, figures waver at the edges of perception, and reality itself seems to fray at the seams. Listen closely. Can you hear the low murmurs, the disjointed whispers, the soft, guttural groans of those lost in their narcotic dreams? The air itself is sickly sweet, heavy with the cloying, pungent aroma of opium, a scent that speaks of oblivion, escape, and ultimate decay. The lamplight, struggling to penetrate the gloom, casts dancing, elongated shadows that seem to writhe and contort on the grimy walls, making every object, every face, seem grotesque, distorted, and profoundly unsettling. This isn't a place of comfort or peace, it's a psychological landscape of unraveling minds. The den is inhabited by spectral figures, men and women reduced to husks, lost in their drug-induced stupors, their consciousnesses drifting on a tide of artificial euphoria or nightmarish visions. They lie scattered on filthy pallets, their faces slack, their eyes vacant or closed, their bodies testament to a profound abandonment of the self. Dickens, with his characteristic keen eye for social commentary, paints a picture of utter degradation, but it's not just a social critique, it's a portal into the darker corners of the human psyche. And among these lost souls, cloaked in the shadows, is our central figure, John Jasper. He is not one of the permanent fixtures, not a long-term inhabitant of this underworld. He is a visitor, a clandestine presence. We see him described as a dark man, with a plentiful supply of dark hair, and beard, and whiskers, a figure both imposing and somewhat indistinct in the smoky haze. His presence here is profoundly shocking because, by all outward appearances, John Jasper is the very embodiment of respectability. This initial glimpse of Jasper is crucial. He sits there, not lost in the same hazy stupor as the others, but intensely focused, driven by a desperate need for the drug's effects. He is seeking something specific, not just escape, but perhaps inspiration, or even a pathway to unlock repressed thoughts. He's asking questions of the opium woman, trying to elicit memories, details from her own drug-induced visions, seemingly hoping to find a reflection, an answer, or a confirmation of his own hidden desires within the distorted mirror of her mind. This immediately sets him apart and raises the first, most pressing questions about his character. Why is he here? What is he looking for? And what secrets does he hope to unearth or bury within the depths of this dark, hallucinatory world? This scene is Dickens at his most psychologically astute. John Jasper, you see, is not just an opium addict. He is the choirmaster of Cloisterham Cathedral, a pillar of the community, a man whose musical talents are revered, whose piety is assumed, and whose influence is considerable. He lives a public life of solemnity, order, and artistic devotion. His days are filled with the sacred. Chapter 2: The Burden of Tradition. The ancient spires of Cloisterham Cathedral, gnarled and time-worn, pierce the perpetually grey sky like the bony fingers of some forgotten giant. Below, the town itself seemed to exhale a perpetual sigh, a quiet, almost mournful breath drawn from centuries of unyielding routine and deeply entrenched customs. For Edwin Drood and Rosa Bud, however, this venerable setting was not a source of comfort or inspiration, but rather, a pervasive, almost suffocating presence, a constant reminder of the unseen, yet undeniably tangible, chains that bound their young lives. Their story, our story, does not begin with the joyous fanfare of a budding romance, nor with the thrilling uncertainty of a love yet to be discovered. Instead, it commences under the pall of an inherited obligation, a peculiar, burdensome legacy, a promise, forged in the distant past by their respective grandfathers, that they would one day marry. Edwin, with his bright, open face and the restless energy of youth, was a promising engineer in training. He possessed a robust good humor, a ready laugh, and an almost boyish enthusiasm for the practicalities of the world. Yet, even his irrepressible spirit could not entirely shake off the peculiar melancholy that clung to the edges of his peculiar engagement. He was a bird of vibrant plumage, but his wings were clipped by an ancient decree. Rosa, a ward of the meticulous, if somewhat dry, solicitor Mr. Grogius, was a creature of delicate beauty and artistic sensibility. Her movements were graceful, her expressions often tinged with a wistful thoughtfulness that belied her tender years. Like a rare and fragile bloom, she seemed destined for a life of quiet elegance, yet she too felt the invisible tendrils of this preordained union tightening around her, threatening to stifle her very essence. They were children of tradition, pledged to each other before they could even grasp the profound implications of such a vow. Their earliest memories were perhaps intertwined with the knowledge of this shared, immutable fate. It was a fact of their existence, as undeniable as the daily rising of the sun, or the relentless tolling of the cathedral bells. This arrangement was not born of their heart's desires, but of an ancestral decree, a neat, convenient solution to familial succession and property concerns. Love, passion, mutual affection, these were secondary, if not entirely disregarded, elements in this peculiar transaction. They were, in essence, a living contract, signed and sealed by generations long past, their individual futures meticulously mapped out by the unwavering hand of Victorian expectation. The air in Cloisterham, heavy with history and hushed secrets, seemed to press down upon them, subtly, inexorably, guiding them towards a fate that felt less like a choice and more like an inescapable current. They were two vessels, launched onto the same river, not by their own volition, but by an unseen force, destined to sail side by side, whether they wished it or not. We find them now in the drawing room of Mr. Grogius's rather austere residence, a space filled with heavy, dark Victorian furniture that seemed to absorb all light and mirth. The ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner was the loudest sound, a relentless metronome counting out the moments of their shared, unchosen existence. Rosa sat at a grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the faint light filtering through the heavy lace curtains. Her slender fingers drifted across the keys, not with the spirited abandon of a performer, but with the introspective, almost mournful touch of one lost in thought, a faint, melancholic nocturne weaving itself into the quiet stillness of the room. Edwin, restless even in repose, was lounging in a voluminous velvet armchair, his long legs stretched out, his gaze fixed upon Rosa, a half-smile playing on his lips, a mixture of exasperation and an undeniable, if platonic, affection. Edwin, still practicing that mournful little dirge, Rosa. One would think you were diligently preparing for a funeral, not, as IUND. Chapter 3, Fresh Blood in Cloisterham. Chapter 3, Fresh blood in Cloisterham, sound of gentle birdsong, distant church bells chiming the quarter hour, a placid, almost sleepy atmosphere. Cloisterham, a town steeped in ancient stone and drowsy tradition, had a rhythm as predictable as the tide of the Medway. Its days unfolded in a measured, decorous sequence, each morning a mirror of the last, each evening a quiet close. Life here was a well-worn path, trodden by generations of respectable feet, careful not to stray into the brambles of novelty or the quicksand of change. The very air seemed to breathe history, a comforting, if somewhat stifling, embrace. Sound of carriage wheels on cobbled stone, gradually growing louder, accompanied by the clip-clop of horses, a definite disruption narrator. But even the most steadfast current can be stirred by a sudden influx, a foreign element introduced without warning. And so it was, on a particular sun-drenched afternoon, that Cloisterham's placid surface was rippled, then agitated, by the arrival of two individuals whose very presence seemed to challenge the venerable quietude of the place. They were the Landless twins, Neville and Helena, and their entrance into this hallowed precinct was less a gentle merging and more a jarring intrusion. Sound of carriage stopping, doors opening, hushed murmurs from unseen onlookers. They descended from the carriage with a quiet intensity, a certain fierce self-possession that immediately set them apart from the town's usual inhabitants. Neville, with his dark complexion and restless eyes, seemed carved from a different, wilder landscape. There was a coiled energy about him, a barely suppressed impatience that suggested vast plains and untamed jungles rather than manicured cathedral greens. His sister, Helena, possessed a similar dark beauty, but hers was tempered by a composure that seemed almost preternatural. Her gaze was direct, unwavering, missing nothing, as if she had learned to read the subtle dangers of the world from a very young age. Sound of distant, hushed whispers, a door creaking open and shut. They had come from Ceylon, a land of exotic fragrances and vivid colors, where life was lived with the raw immediacy unknown to the gentle folk of Cloisterham. They carried with them the vestiges of that distant world, a certain frankness in their manner, a lack of the subtle social fencing that was the very fabric of English interaction, and perhaps a lingering scent of spice and adventure that Cloisterham found both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Mr. Crisparkle, the good canon, with his benevolent heart and robust constitution, had taken them under his wing, arranging their studies and lodgings, hoping to smooth their transition into this vastly different society. But even his well-meaning efforts could not entirely bridge the chasm. Scene: the Crisparkle home. Sounds of polite conversation, clinking teacups, a slight awkwardness. Mrs. Crisparkle, a little flustered, trying to be welcoming. And you say, dear Neville, that the climate in Ceylon is quite invigorating. My, how different from our own mild English mists. I do hope you find our Cloisterham air agreeable. Neville, voice firm, perhaps a touch brusque, Unaccustomed to polite small talk, it is different, certainly, Mrs. Crisparkle. The heat there is omnipresent. Here, one must accustom oneself to the damp. Helena softly, but with a watchful intensity we are accustomed to adapting. Ma'am, our lives have often demanded it. Mrs. Crisparkle, a slight pause, a faint smile indeed, my dear. A most admirable quality. And your studies, Neville, at Mr. Crisparkle's own old school? He speaks so highly of its venerable traditions. Neville, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Tradition is a curious thing. Sometimes it comforts, sometimes it merely confines. Narrator, his bluntness, devoid of the usual English circumlocution, caused a ripple of discomfort, a slight shifting in chairs. Helena, ever vigilant, gave him a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance, a silent warning to temper his candor. These were not the jungle. Chapter 4, The Calculated Provocation. The twilight hour in Cloisterham draped the ancient city in a cloak of deepening shadows, drawing out a peculiar hush that often preceded significant events. For Edwin Drood and Neville Landless, this particular evening held the promise of an uneasy truce, orchestrated with meticulous care by Jasper. As they walked towards the choirmaster's residence, the air thrummed with unspoken tension, a palpable unease that even the most oblivious observer might have discerned. Edwin, usually brimming with an almost childish vivacity, found his usual light-heartedness tempered by a subtle undercurrent of apprehension. His attempts at banter with Neville fell flat, their echoes swallowed by the solemnity of the narrow cobblestone streets. His glances towards Neville were brief, fleeting, laced with an almost unwilling curiosity about the dark, brooding young man who walked beside him. Neville, in stark contrast, radiated a coiled intensity, a palpable defensiveness. His jaw was clenched, his shoulders rigid, as if bracing himself for an inevitable assault, either verbal or otherwise. The afternoon's encounter, far from forging a connection, had only served to highlight the chasm that separated their natures. Jasper, the orchestrator of this strained meeting, watched them approach from his window, a phantom of a smile playing on his lips. His customary calm was an impenetrable mask, but in the depths of his dark eyes, a keen observer might have detected a predatory glint, a silent anticipation of the discord he was about to unleash. He was a master craftsman of human suffering, and his chosen medium tonight was the volatile cocktail of pride and resentment. Scene: John Jasper's apartment. Evening. The choirmaster's apartment exuded an atmosphere of cultivated comfort, perhaps a little too warm for the burgeoning autumn, the air heavy with the rich, complex aromas of a carefully prepared dinner and the subtle, earthy scent of burning logs in the fireplace. Jasper, a picture of serene composure in his dark clerical attire, greeted his guests with an almost theatrical grace. His smile was disarmingly gentle. His eyes, however, held a depth that belied their apparent warmth. "Jasper, gentlemen, do come in from the encroaching chill. I trust your stroll through our venerable city was not too taxing? Edwin, my dear boy, you seem a touch abstracted tonight. And Neville, you carry an air of solemn contemplation, a scholar lost in thought. Come, let us shed these burdens and embrace the conviviality of the table." Edwin managed a somewhat forced smile, shrugging off his coat with a sigh that bordered on resignation. Neville, ever the stoic, merely offered a curt nod, his gaze sweeping the room with an almost suspicious scrutiny before fixing on Jasper with an unwavering intensity. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Edwin abstracted, "Uncle." "Perhaps merely pondering the intricacies of your renowned hospitality, which I assure you, is never taxing. Or perhaps, the legendary potency of your sherry." Jasper, a soft, melodic chuckle, perfectly pitched indeed. "And tonight, I have selected a particularly distinguished vintage, reserved for occasions of significance. Please, make yourselves comfortable by the fire. The roast, a small culinary triumph, will be served shortly. But first, a libation, a little something to thaw the very souls. I have a truly remarkable bottle, one that speaks of distant lands and forgotten vintages." Jasper moved with an almost balletic grace towards a polished mahogany side table, where an array of decanters and bottles gleamed under the soft lamplight. His back was momentarily turned to his guests, his movements precise, deliberate, almost ritualistic. From a cluster of bottles, he selected a slender, dark vessel, its label indistinct in the subdued lighting. For a fleeting, almost imperceptible moment, his fingers seemed to brush against a tiny, stoppered vial, a movement so swift and subtle it would have evaded all but the most hyper-alert observer. Then, with practiced ease, he poured. Chapter 5, The Guardian and the Ring. The ancient stones of Cloisterham often seem to whisper secrets to the passing breeze, secrets of lives lived and destinies woven into its very fabric. But far removed from the cloistered quietude of that venerable town, amidst the bustling, indifferent heart of London, another, perhaps more vital, thread was about to be drawn in the intricate design of Edwin Drood's fate. It was a thread spun by the most unlikely of hands, those of Mr. Gruggius, a man whose very existence seemed to defy the romantic notions that typically govern such narratives. He was a creature of logic, of angles, of law, yet entrusted with the delicate nuances of human hearts. Sound of a distant clock chiming the quarter hour, its sound swallowed almost immediately by the muted rumble of city traffic. The faint, persistent scratching of a pen on paper, methodical and precise. Mr. Gruggius's office, nestled on a street of similar, unassuming facades, was a microcosm of the man himself. It was not merely orderly, it was geometrically severe. Every item, from the weighty legal tomes lining the tall, dust-free shelves to the stark, functional furniture, seemed arranged with a purpose that brooked no deviation. The light filtering through the large, uncurtained windows seemed to lose some of its natural warmth upon entering, casting sharp, defined shadows that mirrored the solicitor's own features. His desk, a formidable expanse of polished mahogany, held an array of instruments, a heavy inkwell, pens laid out with military exactitude, and stacks of documents bound with red tape, all testifying to a life dedicated to the meticulous dissection of human affairs. Mr. Gruggius himself, with his prominent, almost beak-like nose, his sharply pointed chin, and a frame that seemed composed more of elbows and knees than flesh and blood, moved with a peculiar, halting gait. His eyes, though often obscured by thick spectacles, held a surprising depth of earnestness, betraying a moral compass as unyielding as the statutes he so diligently upheld. Today, however, his usual preoccupation with indentures and affidavits was supplanted by a concern of a far more personal, indeed, deeply human, nature. Sound of a door opening and closing with a soft, well-oiled click, followed by the polite clearing of a throat. He had summoned young Edwin Drood, a task he approached with a gravity usually reserved for the most complex of litigations. As Edwin entered, carrying the casual insouciance of youth, a subtle shift occurred in Gruggius's expression, a momentary flicker of paternal anxiety overlaid with his customary professional reserve. Edwin, for his part, though generally fond of his guardian by proxy, often found Mr. Gruggius's company a trifle arid. Edwin, stepping forward, a polite smile on his face, though a hint of youthful impatience lurked beneath "Good morning, Mr. Gruggius. I hope I haven't kept you waiting." A rather swift journey from Cloisterham, all told. Mr. Gruggius, adjusting his spectacles with a delicate movement, his voice a dry, reedy murmur, yet imbued with an underlying sincerity. Drood. Edwin. Punctuality is, as ever, a virtue to be commended. Pray, take a seat. The armchair by the window, if you please. It offers a better vantage point, shall we say, for contemplation. Edwin seats himself, making a slight show of comfort, though the armchair is as stiff and unyielding as the rest of the office furniture. He glances around, stifling a yawn. Edwin, I confess, I was a little surprised by the summons. Not that I don't enjoy our occasional tête-à-têtes, of course, but it sounded rather urgent in your dispatch. Is everything quite well with Rosa? She's not taken ill, has she? Or fallen out with Miss Twinkleton again? Mr. Gruggius, he pauses, his gaze fixed on Edwin, choosing his words with an almost painful deliberation, as if each syllable were a precious commodity. Rosa. Ah, yes, Rosa. She is, to the best of my knowledge, and based on her most recent correspondence, in a state of robust, if occasionally spirited, health. No, Drood, our conversatio. Chapter 6, A Christmas Eve of Shadows. Chapter 6, A Christmas Eve of Shadows. Scene start. Narrator. The wind, a bitter, relentless lament, a mournful dirge, clawed its way through the narrow, twisting passages of Cloisterham on that fateful Christmas Eve. It was not merely a fierce winter gust, it was a living, breathing, almost sentient entity, keen and sharp, whispering ancient, dark secrets against the weathered stone of the cathedral, rattling the very bones and foundations of the old city. It moaned around chimney pots with a desolate sound, whistled with eerie precision through forgotten archways, and seemed to pluck with icy fingers at the leaded panes of every quiet, unassuming home, demanding entry, foretelling disruption and chaos. Its icy breath carried with it a palpable premonition of sorrows yet to unfold, a chilling promise of a profound darkness that would soon settle, not just upon the bleak landscape, but upon the very souls and spirits of those who dwelt within the city's ancient confines. A sky, heavy and bruised, the color of an old wound, pressed down like a leaden lid, suffocating the last, fleeting vestiges of daylight and plunging the venerable city into an early, unnatural twilight. The usual cheerful twinkle of festive lights, usually so welcoming, seemed hesitant, frail, mere sparks desperately fighting against the encroaching, dominant gloom. Every shadow appeared deeper, elongated and sinister, clinging tenaciously to corners and lurking silently beneath eaves, as if the very fabric of the air had thickened with unseen meaning, holding its collective breath, awaiting some momentous, irreversible turn of events. The festive spirit, usually so robust and vibrant in the heart of winter, felt muted, a distant, forgotten melody, a mere whisper against the encroaching silence and the growing, oppressive weight of unseen, malevolent forces. The air itself was thick with a palpable tension, a quiet, almost inaudible hum of unease that settled upon the cold, hard, cobbled streets and seeped insidiously into the very marrow of those who ventured out into the gathering, unforgiving darkness. It was a night when the world seemed to hold a vast, unspoken secret, a hushed conspiracy whispered among the skeletal, bare branches of the trees, and echoed by the distant, mournful, almost human tolling of the cathedral bell. Each slow, heavy toll seemed to mark not just the passing of another minute, but the relentless approach of an inevitable, unalterable fate. Edwin Drood, his coat collar drawn high, almost to his ears, against the biting, pervasive chill that seemed to penetrate bone, walked with a restless, almost frenetic energy that starkly contradicted the oppressive, heavy atmosphere. His breath plumed in thick, white clouds before him, dissipating with unnatural speed into the deepening, frigid twilight, as if snatched away by unseen hands. His mind was a maelstrom, a tumultuous whirl of conflicting emotions, anticipation for a release from obligation, apprehension about the true nature of what lay ahead, and a strange, almost giddy, burgeoning sense of personal freedom. He was to meet Rosa, his child sweetheart, his intended, the girl with whom his future had been so meticulously, if carelessly, mapped out by others. Their rendezvous point was near the ancient, solemn archway of the cathedral precinct, a place steeped in centuries of history and hushed reverence. The very thought of their impending conversation, the honest, unvarnished truth they were to finally speak aloud, both exhilarated him with its promise of liberation and unnerved him with its profound finality. Their engagement, a legacy born of their parents' long-dead wishes, had always felt more like a comfortable, well-worn habit than a vibrant, passionate, undeniable commitment. Tonight, that habit, that inherited obligation, was to be gently, irrevocably, yet lovingly, broken. Rosa Bud, too, approached the rendezvous point with a similar, yet distinct, mixture of trepidation and quiet, unwavering determination. Her delicate features, usually so expressive and open, were an. Chapter 7, The Great Storm and the Disappearance. Sound of distant, ominous thunder rumbling, low and growing. Wind begins to pick up, a mournful whistle. Ladies and gentlemen, we arrive now at the precipice, the very edge of the abyss, where the intricate threads of our story threaten to unravel completely under the merciless gaze of an unforgiving sky. This, dear listeners, is the night upon which Cloisterham, a town so often steeped in the quiet reverence of its ancient stones, would be plunged into a maelstrom, both meteorological and psychological, from which it would never truly recover its former innocence. The day had closed with an unusual, almost oppressive stillness. The air, thick and heavy, seemed to cling to the very breath in one's lungs. A peculiar yellow light, eerie and unnatural, had bathed the ancient cathedral and its surrounding dwellings, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like specters of foreboding. Then, as dusk deepened into night, the first whispers of the coming tempest began their insidious work. Sound of wind escalating, rain starting to patter against window panes, increasing in intensity. Initially, it was merely a squall, a blustery protest against the placid order of things. But soon, the squall gathered teeth, its breath becoming a roar, its tears a torrential downpour that lashed at the very fabric of the world outside. The quaint, narrow streets of Cloisterham, usually resounding with the soft echoes of footsteps and distant chimes, were now surrendered to the furious symphony of the storm. Rain, driven by a gale of unimaginable force, hammered against roofs and windows, rattling panes, and seeking any purchase to infiltrate the seemingly sturdy homes. Gutters overflowed, their contents merging with the deluge to form raging torrents in the cobblestone path. Sound of heavy rain, fierce wind howling, branches creaking and snapping in the distance. And then, the thunder. No longer a distant grumble, but a violent, earth-shaking detonation that reverberated through the very bones of the town. Each flash of lightning ripped through the suffocating darkness, momentarily illuminating a world transformed into a chaotic tableau of swaying trees, lashing rain, and the stark, menacing silhouette of the cathedral, standing defiant, yet vulnerable, against the furious onslaught. It was as if nature itself had unleashed a primeval fury, purging the land with an elemental rage. Sleep, for most, was an impossibility, replaced by a tense, wide-eyed vigil as the very foundations of their world seemed to tremble. Inside the venerable cathedral, the ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of prayer and praise now bore the brunt of this unprecedented assault. The wind, finding purchase in every crevice and cranny, howled through its lofty arches, a banshee's shriek that mingled with the deafening drumming of rain on the leaden roof. The great stained glass windows, usually glowing with serene light, now seemed to weep, their vibrant colors momentarily starkly revealed by the blinding lightning strikes, only to be swallowed by the blackness once more. Sound of wind reaching a crescendo, rain now a deluge, punctuated by incredibly loud thunderclaps that shake the listener. A creaking sound begins to be heard, subtle at first, then growing louder. And then, it happened. A sound unlike any other, a sound that would forever be etched into the collective memory of Cloisterham. Above the cacophony of the storm, a deeper, more terrible groaning began. The ancient timbers of the cathedral roof, which had stood steadfast against time and tempest for generations, now groaned under the immense, unrelenting pressure. It was the sound of something vast and ancient being torn asunder. A high-pitched, splintering shriek of wood, followed by a series of sickening, prolonged cracks that echoed like pistol shots in the tumultuous air. Sound of a tremendous, cataclysmic crack, followed by the terrifying rending of wood, grinding stone, and a cascade of heavy, crashing masonry. The wind and rain sounds suddenly become much louder, as if an immense aperture. Chapter 8: The Hunt and the Watch. The chill of the winter dawn still clung to the air, a damp, pervasive cold that seeped into bones and spirits alike. Cloisterham awoke that fateful morning not to the usual clang of the cathedral bells, but to a different, more somber sound, the hushed, urgent murmur of a town gripped by dread. Edwin Drood was gone. vanished into the thin, treacherous mist of the previous night. The search had begun in earnest, a desperate, disorganized scramble by lantern light that slowly coalesced into a more focused, grim endeavor as the sun reluctantly crept above the horizon. Every nook and cranny of the ancient city, every shadowy lane, every quiet garden was scrutinized. But the focus, inevitably, turned to the river where, a silent, swirling artery that flowed past Cloisterham, its waters dark and forbidding. It was there, in the murky, slow-moving currents just beyond the weir, where the true horror began to unfurl. A small, ragged band of searchers, their faces etched with fatigue and fear, were systematically raking the riverbed with long poles and grappling hooks. The air was thick with unspoken questions, with the heavy weight of suspicion that had already begun to settle, like an ill omen, upon one young man. A sudden shout pierced the tense silence. Here! Something here! All eyes, heavy-lidded and bloodshot, snapped towards the cry. A burly man, a local fisherman known for his grim determination, was pulling at a hook, his brow furrowed with effort. Slowly, agonizingly, something began to surface from the watery depths. It was not the body they had dreaded to find, yet its appearance was almost more shocking, more profoundly disturbing. First, a glint of gold. Then, unmistakably, a watch. Edwin Drood's watch. The elegant, engraved timepiece that had been a gift, a symbol of his youth and promise. It emerged, dripping and mud-stained, but undeniably his. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd gathered on the riverbank. Every eye was fixed on the object, a silent, irrefutable witness to a terrible event. And then, almost immediately afterwards, another discovery. Trapped amongst some reeds near the same spot, caught on a snag of twisted roots, was a shirt pin. Not just any shirt pin, but Edwin's distinctive pin, the one he had worn so often, its small, jeweled head now dulled by the river's embrace. The items were laid out on the damp grass, pathetic, eloquent testaments to a life brutally cut short. There was no longer any room for doubt. Edwin Drood was gone. Murdered. And these few, precious remnants were all that remained to tell the tale. The quiet dread instantly transformed into a palpable surge of grief and a furious thirst for vengeance. The discovery of the jewelry, while confirming their worst fears, also presented a chilling paradox. Why had these small, easily overlooked items been found, yet no trace of Edwin's body? The river was meticulously searched, upstream and down, for days that bled into weeks. Divers plumbed its depths, dragging nets along its bottom. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole, or perhaps, the very river had dissolved him into its currents, leaving only these few metallic tears behind. This inexplicable absence of a body, juxtaposed with the distinct presence of his personal effects, sparked a horrifying theory that circulated in hushed, morbid whispers throughout Cloisterham. The quicklime theory. It was an appalling notion, yet one that gained insidious traction in the absence of any other explanation. Quicklime, or calcium oxide, was known for its corrosive properties. In large enough quantities, it could reduce organic matter to an unrecognizable pulp, leaving no bone, no sinew, no trace of what was once human. Could a body, perhaps weighed down and placed in a pit of quicklime, have been utterly consumed, leaving only the indestructible metal of a watch and a shirt pin to eventually be washed into the river? The thought alone was enough to curdle the blood, lending an almost supernatural dimension to the crime. It spoke of a premedita. Chapter 10, The Garden Confession. Welcome to Chapter 10 of The Mystery of Edwin Drood, The Garden Confession. The air in Cloisterham, usually so placid and ancient, is about to thicken with a tension far more suffocating than its cathedral fogs. Here, in a secluded corner of the college garden, under the indifferent gaze of ancient stones and rustling leaves, a scene of profound disquiet is about to unfold. Rosa Bud, youthful and tender, finds herself ensnared in a web of obsession, woven by the very man who should have been her protector, her music master, John Jasper. This is the moment when the sinister undercurrents of his personality break surface, a terrifying declaration of love that feels more like a threat, sealing her fate with a chill that will echo through her young life. The idyllic setting becomes a cage, and the gentle breeze carries not sweet scents, but the poisoned words of a dangerous, possessive mind. Sound of distant bells, the rustle of leaves, a bird singing briefly. Rosa Vio, I had sought solace in the garden. The air was cool, the scent of summer blossoms usually a comfort. But today, an unease clung to me, a premonition I couldn't shake. The departure of Edwin had left an emptiness, yes, but also a strange, new freedom, a quiet space in my soul. Yet, that space felt threatened, as if unseen eyes watched my every move. Scene start: the college garden. Rosa Bud sits on a stone bench, idly plucking a rose petal. She is dressed simply, her demeanor thoughtful, a hint of melancholy mixed with a nascent sense of independence. The shadows are lengthening. Rosa sighs softly, looking around. It's so quiet. Too quiet. I almost wish Grugius would send for me. Or Helena. Anyone. A figure emerges from the archway of the cloisters, moving with a deliberate, almost predatory quietness. It is John Jasper. His eyes, usually half-lidded, are fixed intently on Rosa. He walks towards her, slowly, deliberately, not making a sound until he is quite close. Jasper, Rosa. Rosa starts, dropping the petal. Her head snaps up, her eyes widening with a flicker of fear she tries to conceal. Rosa, Mr. Jasper. You quite startled me. I didn't hear you approach. Jasper, did you not? My apologies. I often move with a soft step. You seemed lost in thought. A penny for them. Or perhaps, an answer to a question that has long haunted me. Rosa, a faint blush on her cheeks, trying to seem composed, merely enjoying the evening air. Mr. Jasper. And thinking, perhaps, of the future. My future. Now that Edwin. Jasper, Edwin. Yes. Edwin. Gone, isn't he? Like a leaf blown from the tree. And with his departure, a certain impediment is removed. Rosa frowns, sensing the shift in his tone. Impediment? What do you mean? Edwin was my fiancé. Jasper, approaching closer, his voice dropping to a low, intense murmur. A paper fiancé, Rosa. A child's plaything. An arrangement, not a passion. You know it, I know it, the very stones of this place know it. You were never truly his. Not in the way a woman is given to a man, heart and soul. Rosa, standing, a tremor in her voice. Mr. Jasper, you speak strangely. I don't understand. I think I should go indoors. Jasper steps in front of her, blocking her path. His eyes are burning with an unnatural light. He speaks rapidly, the words tumbling out, layered with a desperate intensity that is both horrifying and pathetic. No. You will not go. Not yet. You will hear me. You must hear me. For too long, I have suffered in silence. For too long, I have watched you, desired you, yearned for you, knowing you were tied to that boy. That mere shadow of a man who could never appreciate the fire in your spirit, the depth of your being, the exquisite torment you inflict upon a soul like mine. Rosa, stepping back, her hands coming up defensively. Her face is pale with dawning horror. Mr. Jasper. What are you saying? This is monstrous. Jasper, monstrous. Is it monstrous to love? Is it monstrous to burn with a desire so profound it consumes one's very marrow? Is it monstrous to see in you, Rosa, not merely a pretty face, but the very essence of Beau? Chapter 11, The Unfinished Symphony. Welcome back, dear listeners, to our continuing journey into the perplexing and endlessly fascinating world of the Mystery of Edwin Drood. Today, we arrive at a truly poignant moment, a chapter unlike any other we've explored thus far. This is Chapter 11, The Unfinished Symphony, a title that itself carries the profound weight of an unfulfilled promise, a melody cut short before its final, resounding chord. We stand at the precipice of a literary abyss, staring into the void where one of literature's greatest storytellers was abruptly silenced, leaving his final masterpiece tantalizingly incomplete. We have journeyed together through the shadowy, cobblestone streets of Cloisterham, peering into the conflicted soul of John Jasper, observing the fragile innocence of Rosa Bud, feeling the fiery passion of Neville Landless, and, more recently, speculating about the mysterious figure of Datchery. The stage, as always with Dickens, was meticulously set. The tension was palpable, secrets were on the cusp of being unearthed, and the intricate threads of the plot were beginning to weave into a tapestry of impending revelation. Dickens, throughout his prodigious and prolific career, had always delivered. He was a master architect of narrative, meticulously wrapping up his complex plots with an astonishing blend of precision and emotional impact. But with Edwin Drood, fate, in its cruelest and most unexpected manifestation, intervened, altering not only the course of this novel but the very landscape of English literature. It is with a heavy heart, and a profound sense of reverence, that we turn now to the very last words Charles Dickens ever committed to paper for this novel. Imagine him at his desk, as the gaslight flickered, perhaps late into the night, or in the quiet hours of a morning in June. His quill in hand, his mind still furiously weaving the intricate threads of his story, even as his physical being began its final, arduous protest. These are not merely words on a page, they are the last whispers of a genius, suddenly silenced, leaving us suspended in time and narrative. Here, my friends, are those final, tantalizing paragraphs from chapter 23, appropriately titled "The Dawn Comes Slowly," a chapter that hints at the light of truth beginning to pierce through the murky shadows of Cloisterham's secrets. Listen closely, for these are the echoes of a voice that shaped an era, a voice that was about to deliver its ultimate resolution, only to be tragically stilled, when Mr. Datchery has walked a round or two. He observes Mr. Durdles come out of his lodge, and go round the cathedral. In the course of his round, he pauses, and looks about him, as if in the expectation of meeting somebody, but, as nobody appears, he goes into the cathedral. Mr. Datchery waits a little, and then goes in too. He finds Mr. Durdles before the chancel rail, looking up at the royal arms, and looking about him, and looking up at the oaken roof. "Hello," says Mr. Datchery, all at once. "For the Lord's sake don't," cries Mr. Durdles, turning quickly. "How did you come here?" "Why, my good sir, don't I always come here? I am constantly here, God bless you. I never saw you come in." So Mr. Jasper has often said. "Won't you come out of the cold, Mr. Durdles?" "No, I'm not cold. I'm thinking of my old partner, Mr. Sapsea. I wish he'd been buried with a stone over him. I wish I had been." "And why?" "Because then I shouldn't be here, should I? I shouldn't be a-looking at them stones, and a-thinking of them, and a-waiting for them. I wish I was a stone." "A very curious wish, Mr. Durdles. But I understand. The peace of the grave, and all that." "Aye, the peace of the grave," he replies, with a shiver, "and the warmth of the tomb," and that he stops, and looks about him, and then at Mr. Datchery. "I've a mind to tell you something," he says. "And what is that, Mr. Durdles?" "I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it all night. I've been thinking about it ever since." He stops again, and looks about him, and then at Mr. Datchery. "Ever since I.s." Chapter 12, Solving the Puzzle, Theories. Welcome back, dear listeners, to our continuing journey into the perplexing labyrinth that is Charles Dickens' unfinished masterpiece, The Mystery of Edwin Drood. We've traversed the cobblestone streets of Cloisterham, peered into the shadowy corners of its ancient cathedral, and felt the chill of impending doom that permeates every page. Now, as we stand on the precipice of a definitive resolution, we arrive at perhaps the most anticipated, and yet most agonizing, chapter of our exploration, Chapter 12, Solving the Puzzle Theories. For over a century and a half, scholars, amateur sleuths, and passionate readers like yourselves have grappled with the central question: what truly happened to Edwin Drood? Dickens, in his cruelest stroke of genius, left us at the very peak of the suspense, denying us the satisfaction of his intended conclusion. But the beauty of such a void is the invitation it extends to imagination, to deduction, and to the pursuit of truth within the confines of his meticulously crafted world. Today, we dive headfirst into the most credible, the most compelling, and the most fiercely debated endings proposed by those who have dedicated their lives to deciphering Dickens' final enigma. Prepare yourselves, for we are about to confront the darkness and the dazzling twists that might have been. Let us begin with what many consider the most chilling, and arguably the most direct, resolution: the theory that John Jasper, Edwin's uncle, and choirmaster, strangled him. This isn't merely a speculative leap, it's heavily supported by what little we know of Dickens' own notes and conversations. His daughter, Kate Perugini, spoke of Jasper's guilt, and John Forster, his biographer, mentioned Dickens' intention for Jasper to be the murderer. The sheer psychological intensity with which Dickens builds Jasper's character points unmistakably in this direction. Think back to Jasper's suffocating obsession with Rosa Bud, an obsession so potent, so twisted, that it consumes him entirely. Edwin Drood, his nephew, stands as an innocent, unwitting obstacle to this dark desire. He is Rosa's fiancé, a symbol of everything Jasper craves but cannot have. This motive, burning with the intensity of unrequited love turned to poisonous jealousy, provides the perfect psychological fuel for murder. Picture the scene: Christmas Eve, a night meant for joyous celebration, but for Jasper, it's a night of internal torment. He lures Edwin, perhaps under the guise of an uncle's affection, to some isolated spot. The cathedral tower, a place of historical significance, or perhaps the lonely riverbank, shrouded in fog and shadow. We've seen Jasper's fascination with the opium den, a place where his true, sinister self is unleashed. He walks through Cloisterham with a furtive air, always watching, always calculating. He possesses a strange, almost hypnotic control over Edwin, a power derived from their familial bond and Edwin's guileless trust. The actual act of murder itself is hinted at with chilling precision. Consider the garroting, the tight grip around the neck, a common form of murder in fiction of that era. Dickens was known to research such details. The red light that Jasper sees in his opium-induced visions, often interpreted as the glow of a lantern near a body, or the crimson flush of murderous rage, seems to foreshadow the horror. The immediate disposal of the body in the quicklime pit within the crypt of the cathedral, a detail that adds a horrifying layer of macabre ingenuity. This isn't just a simple killing, it's a meticulously planned act of erasure, designed to leave no trace, no evidence. The lime, meant to dissolve and destroy, mirroring Jasper's desire to obliterate Edwin from existence, and from Rosa's memory. The cold, calculating nature of this act, perpetrated by a man outwardly respectable, makes it all the more terrifying. It speaks to the darkest recesses of the human heart, where passion can curdle into pure evil. This theory aligns perfectly with Dickens' recurring theme of hidden depravity beneath a veneer of 7-day action plan, uncovering your own mysteries. Welcome, fellow seekers of truth and understanding, to a deeply personal journey inspired by one of literature's most enduring enigmas, Charles Dickens' The Mystery of Edwin Drood. We stand at a unique crossroads, poised to delve not just into the pages of a master storyteller, but into the very fabric of our own lives. This chapter, 7-Day Action Plan, Uncovering Your Own Mysteries, isn't merely a guide, it's an invitation, a challenge, and ultimately, a path to profound self-discovery. We're going to apply the rich, complex psychological themes woven throughout Dickens' unfinished masterpiece to our own personal self-development, transforming literary exploration into life-altering introspection. Dickens, even in his final, incomplete work, demonstrated an unparalleled genius for dissecting the human psyche. His characters are not simply figures on a page, They are mirrors reflecting our own hidden desires, our secret fears, our suppressed selves. The unresolved ending of Edwin Drood becomes a powerful metaphor for the unresolved questions, the lingering doubts, the unspoken narratives within our own lives. And just as the readers of Dickens' time yearned for closure, we too yearn for resolution in the mysteries of our own existence. This 7-day plan is structured to guide you, step by step, through a process of self-examination, using the archetypes and narrative devices of Edwin Drood as your unique lens. Each day, we will draw inspiration from a character or a narrative thread, not to solve Drood's mystery, but to illuminate yours. It's about pulling back the curtain on your own psychological landscape, bringing light to the shadows, and ultimately, writing a more conscious, more fulfilling ending to your own unfolding story. This isn't about quick fixes, it's about sustained, courageous engagement with yourself. It will require honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to look inward, even when the view is uncomfortable. But I promise you, the rewards of such a journey are immeasurable. So, take a deep breath, gather your courage, and let us embark on this transformative expedition together. Day 1 and 2, Shadow Work. Identifying your Jasper side. Let's begin where the mystery truly begins, in the shadow depths of the human heart, with the character of John Jasper. Jasper, on the surface, is a respectable choirmaster, a man of music and piety. But beneath this polished exterior lurks a dark, obsessive, and ultimately destructive force. He embodies the hidden habits, the suppressed desires, the secret addictions that we all carry within us, often pushing them down into the recesses of our unconscious, hoping they will simply disappear. This, my friends, is what psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow, the unknown dark side of the personality. It's not necessarily evil, but it's the sum of all the things we've decided don't fit our conscious self-image, the parts we've rejected or denied. For day 1 and 2, our task is to begin the delicate, yet crucial, work of identifying your own Jasper side. This isn't about judgment or self-condemnation. It's about awareness, about bringing into the light those aspects of yourself that operate in the dark, influencing your behavior without your full conscious consent. Think about the habits you engage in when no one is watching, the urges you suppress but still feel, the thoughts that shame you, the comforts you turn to when stressed or bored that you know aren't truly serving you. Perhaps your Jasper side manifests as a hidden addiction, not necessarily to a substance, but to a pattern of behavior, endless scrolling on social media, compulsive overworking, emotional eating, excessive spending, or even a pattern of negative self-talk that you indulge in when you feel vulnerable. It could be an unacknowledged envy, a deep-seated resentment you cling to, or a tendency towards passive aggression rather than direct communication. What are the things you do or feel that, if brought into the harsh light of day, would contradict the image you strive to present to the world? Summary: the 3 pillars of Drood. Welcome, fellow enthusiasts of the enigmatic and the enduring, to a journey into the heart of Charles Dickens' final, unfinished masterpiece, The Mystery of Edwin Drood. We stand at a precipice, looking down into the shadowy depths of a narrative left incomplete, yet brimming with tantalizing clues, psychological complexities, and profound moral observations. Today, our task is to synthesize this long, winding narrative, with all its suspense and unspoken dread, into 3 core takeaways, 3 foundational pillars that support the very essence of Drood's haunting legacy. These aren't just plot points, they are universal truths, brilliantly illuminated by Dickens, even without his final flourish. So, let us delve deep into the human condition as explored in Cloisterham, unearthing the dark beauty and chilling revelations that define this extraordinary work. Our first pillar, the very bedrock upon which much of the drama is built, is the profound and often terrifying duality of human nature. Dickens, with his unparalleled insight into the human psyche, masterfully paints characters who are not merely good or evil, but intricate tapestries woven with threads of both light and shadow, often struggling within the confines of a single soul. The most glaring, the most chilling example of this, of course, resides in the figure of John Jasper. On the surface, Jasper is the very epitome of respectability in the tranquil, ancient cathedral town of Cloisterham. He is the revered choirmaster, a man whose melodious voice echoes through the hallowed aisles, leading the congregation in hymns of praise. He is Edwin Drood's uncle, seemingly a concerned guardian, a man of quiet devotion and artistic temperament. His public persona is one of piety, gentleness, and an almost melancholic grace, making him an integral and seemingly benign part of the community. But peel back that carefully constructed veneer, and what do we find? A man consumed by the most base and destructive passions. The same lips that sing hymns in the cathedral also draw on the opium pipe in the squalid dens of London, seeking escape from a tormenting inner world. The same hands that guide the choir are, we suspect, stained with the intention, if not the act, of murder. His love for Rosa Bud is not affection, but a possessive, corrosive obsession, turning what should be a tender emotion into a monstrous desire for ownership. This stark contrast between his outward sanctity and his inward depravity is the very essence of human duality, presented in its most extreme and terrifying form. Dickens doesn't just suggest a dichotomy, he shoves it in our faces, making us confront the unsettling truth that the capacity for profound evil can reside in the same breast as the capacity for outward virtue, making the most ordinary man a potential monster. The respectability is a mask, a performance, designed to lull suspicion while darker impulses fester beneath. It's a terrifying thought, that the person you trust, the person who seems most upright, might be harboring the most sinister secrets. This duality forces us to question appearances, to look beyond the surface, a theme that resonates far beyond the pages of this novel. And Jasper isn't alone in hinting at this complexity. Even characters less extreme embody subtle forms of internal conflict. Think of the minor canons, outwardly pious, yet perhaps prone to vanity or petty jealousies. Think of Edwin himself, a good-natured young man, but prone to bouts of petulance and a youthful insensitivity that, while not malicious, reveals imperfections. Dickens understands that humanity is rarely monochromatic. We are all mixtures, a battleground of impulses. The genius of Drood lies in how it magnifies this internal struggle in Jasper, making him a symbol for the hidden depths and dark corners that potentially lurk within us all, challenging our assumptions about good and evil, and forcing us to consider the fine line between the two, a line that can be so easily blurred, so catastrophically crossed. The constant tension between the call to action, join the investigation. My dear fellow literary enthusiasts, seekers of truth, and connoisseurs of the captivating unknown, we've journeyed together through the labyrinthine streets of Cloisterham, peered into the shadowed corners of human nature, and grappled with the tantalizing threads of the most infamous unfinished mystery in English literature, Charles Dickens's The Mystery of Edwin Drood. We've dissected characters, analyzed motives, and pondered every lingering glance, every hushed word, every single, frustrating, brilliant detail left behind by the master storyteller himself. And now, as we stand at the precipice, gazing into the chasm of what might have been. It's no longer just my investigation, it's our investigation. This is our moment to collectively breathe life back into Edwin Drood, to ignite the embers of speculation, and to truly keep this mystery alive, not just as a historical literary curiosity, but as a vibrant, ongoing collaborative puzzle. For centuries, readers have wrestled with the central, agonizing question that plagues anyone who dares to delve into these pages: is Edwin Drood dead, or is he alive? Was he brutally murdered on that fateful Christmas Eve, his body disposed of in the limekiln, his fate sealed by the sinister machinations of his uncle, John Jasper? Or did he somehow, miraculously, against all odds, escape the clutches of peril, perhaps even orchestrate his own disappearance, only to return later in disguise, seeking justice, or perhaps even revenge? The sheer audacity of Dickens leaving us with such an unresolved cliffhanger is both a testament to his genius and, frankly, a mild form of literary torture that we, as his devoted readers, have willingly subjected ourselves to for generations. And it's this very torture, this delicious suspense, that binds us together across time and space. Think about the implications of each possibility. If Edwin is truly dead, then John Jasper's guilt is almost unassailable, a chilling portrait of obsessive, destructive love turned to murderous rage. Every one of his subsequent actions, his feigned grief, his subtle manipulations, his increasingly desperate attempts to ensnare Rosa, all take on a truly monstrous quality. We're looking at a premeditated, cold-blooded murder, meticulously planned and executed with a cunning born of desperation and a mind warped by opium. The tragedy is profound, the injustice immense, and the search for proof becomes a desperate race against a clever, remorseless villain. The story then shifts into a quest for retribution, a complex web of investigation led by the likes of Datchery, whose mysterious arrival only deepens the layers of potential revelation. The world of Drood, in this scenario, is a dark, perilous place, where innocence can be snuffed out in an instant, and evil lurks beneath a veneer of respectability. But what if Edwin is alive? What if he somehow survived that night, perhaps escaped Jasper's initial assault, or was spared by an unforeseen intervention? Imagine the sheer ingenuity required to pull off such a deception, to vanish without a trace, leaving behind just enough circumstantial evidence to point to murder, thereby leading Jasper down a path of increasing self-incrimination. If Edwin is alive, then the story transforms from a murder mystery into something even more intricate, a tale of an elaborate ruse, a sophisticated game of cat and mouse, where the supposed victim is, in fact, the ultimate player. The implications are staggering. Who aided him? What was his motive for disappearing? Was it simply to expose Jasper, or was there a deeper, more personal reason tied to his relationship with Rosa or his own restless nature? And who, then, is Datchery? Could Datchery be Edwin, in a masterstroke of disguise, returning to haunt his tormentor and gather the definitive proof needed for his ultimate downfall? The very thought sends shivers down the spine, promising a reveal that would redefine every single scene we've witnessed, every conversation we've overheard. The arguments for both sides are compelling, aren't they? Thank you for listening to this audiobook. If you found value, meaning, or inspiration in this journey, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter. Your support helps us bring more timeless classics to life. See you in the next reading.